I like holding things. Good afternoon. By show of hands, real quick, just so I can figure out where I want to take this talk, how many people in this room have no idea who I am or know anything about me? Please raise your hands. Cool, so I don't have to go too much in the backstory, so I won't waste your time. I actually want to do as much Q&A as possible, but I'll deliver on some content because I don't want to think anybody thinks that I'm just mailing it in. It's really interesting. Today's my dad's birthday. Thank you. And 18 years ago, this exact day, because it was my dad's birthday, it was my first day of now physically being in the store full time, a liquor store that my family owned called Shoppers Discount Liquors in Springfield, New Jersey, that I later rebranded to Wine Library. It was literally 18 years ago today on my first day, and I'd been in the business a lot. Since I was 14, I'd worked there all the time and every summer, and I'd already been doing buying decisions and operation decisions through college. So I was integrated into the business. But this was literally at some weird level, the most official first day of me really operating the business full time. And the first thing I did was I had two very senior meetings, one with the biggest distributor in the market and two actually, now that I recall, two other meetings with two of the largest importers of wine in America. You know, multi-billion-dollar companies, big boy stuff, the CEOs of those companies. And for the next 3 hours, that morning, 18 years ago today, three 50-year-old gentlemen pounded me and explained to me how nobody in the world was going to buy wine on the internet. And that one of them, who now at all costs tries to deny this conversation, which makes me sad that we didn't have the technology that we have now. One of them even had the audacity to tell me that the internet was a fad and that the money I was spending on this was wasted and I should continue to do newspaper ads and things of that nature, which I did. I think it's super fun that I'm here. I was super flattered when I was asked and I wanted to be a part of it, and it was cool to wake up this morning and realize that was, 18 years is a lot. But it's really not. It all just kind of really depends on how you want to contextualize it. I think what's interesting, as I've been following the conversation that's been going on here today, is there's always friction between what people think they want, what they think their consumers want, what's actually happening in innovation and technology in parallel to those moments. And I'm always fascinated by that. I'm always fascinated by the notion as an entrepreneur of when does romance put people out of business? When do people draw lines in the sand about how they want the world to be versus the way the world is actually behaving? And I think that's the theme of what's next. What's next is, yesterday I was on the West Coast and saw a piece of technology that allows you to put contact lenses in your eyes and record everything, right? And basically barely detect it, right? I thought that was neat. You want to talk about living life on the record 24/7. If we literally, it's an early product, but if you literally project out 5 years from today and recognize that there are people walking around with cameras directly in their goddamn eyeballs and everything you ever say conceivably could be on the record, an interesting thing starts happening. You start changing behavior. And then the ebb and flow of changed behavior is what most fascinates me. The day I saw Yelp a few minutes after it come out, and then realizing what was gonna be the exact trajectory of that 10-year cycle of, okay, now there's this place of scale that people may go look that will impact places of business. Then you're gonna have that actually happen, and people will start reacting to those reviews. But wait a minute, they're actually anonymous reviews. And wait a minute, now there are companies that are being built that are getting paid by people to write negative reviews about those people's competitors. And you go full circle. And so what's next is very simple. It's what's always been. Humans are always gonna behave the same way forever. It's who we are. We evolve to the tools that we're being given. And I think the thing for this room, somebody who came from the food and wine industry, then has spent a lot of time in tech in my last decade, then getting involved with Ben and Rezi and spending more time digging deep into the restaurant side more than the wine, retail, and distribution side. I think the thing that every single person in this room, and even fancy me who has the biggest ego of being good at projecting where things are going, I think what's next is that every single person in this room is grossly and I mean grossly underestimating the speed of technology changes that we're all about to live through over the next decade. If you think a lot of shit hit the fan the last 15 years, when you start compounding what the infrastructure that has been created by this innovation for the last 15 years does when it's built on top of, you start getting into a very interesting place. And there's a couple principles that I would argue that everybody should really ground themselves in that I think are the ultimate in hospitality. Let me explain. One of the biggest devastating mistakes of my career as an investor was that I passed on investing in Uber in the angel round at a $4 million valuation twice. All the while when the first book I ever wrote, Crush It, acknowledges only my family and one random human being, Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber. So not only did I pass twice, he was my boy. And that $25,000 that I was writing those checks now is worth $197 million. So that's awkward, but there's an interesting part to this story. This is not just for self-deprecation. I invested in it in the next round, so I'll still be okay, not as insane. But there's a funny reason I did. Travis came to New York. My brother took the first Uber ever in New York, Rider Zero, to test it. And something interesting happened. I remember trying to figure out if Uber was gonna work in New York. It started having traction in SF, but we're New York, right? Like we have so much infrastructure. Like SF, LA, they don't have the subway system, the taxi system. It just like on common sense, it didn't make as much sense. And then something really interesting happened. AJ, who was Rider Zero, ordered the cab while we were in the office of VaynerMedia, and then came downstairs and walked right in. And literally it struck me in 2 seconds, and then I got aggressive about trying to invest. Uber wasn't selling transportation, Uber was selling time. And so one of the things that I'm spending a lot of time on is how do products and services sell back time to us? Listening to the last panel and being very heavily a big fan of advertising, I think if you think about advertising, for the last 50 years, all that advertising has done is stolen your time. You wanted to read this article, you turn the page, and there's a big full page ad of a car, you have to turn the page, couple seconds taken away. You wanna watch the Fonz, they let you watch 4 minutes, they stop you and they try to sell you popcorn, right? And on and on and on. You're listening to a baseball game, there's a natural stop in the game, they're gonna try to sell you beer on the radio, bringing it all the way back. Somewhere in the early 2000s, when we started getting into TiVo land, technology started being built to take our time back. And more importantly, the behavior that you guys are all now acting on is a bigger indicator to the fact that time has become one of the biggest assets in our world. Let me explain. This is gonna be interesting to see how you guys react to this. By show of hands, how many people in this room are now pissed off when another human being calls them? Raise your hand. Raise your hand high. I want everybody to see this. You don't have to force it. I just want to know, keep it up for a second because I want everybody to look around. Let's just look around real quick because I want to see this. 50% of this room, 50% of this room is upset when another human being calls them, period. When I started asking this question 2-3 years ago, the numbers were very low. Most people didn't even understand what the hell I was asking. But I started seeing the momentum being built. And eventually, and I'll tell you in 2 or 3 years, the rest of this room is gonna raise their hand because what half of us have felt, and it will grow, is why in the world would somebody call me on their time and bother me when they can text me or email me and I will get back to them on my time? Now, let's talk about a phone call. A phone call as a brand was not the most negative thing. Forget about somebody cold calling you. Like, I'm talking about people here are mad when their brother calls them, right? As a brand, a phone call wasn't negative. This was a nice thing. Somebody could call and like talk to you and shoot the shit about the football game or wish you a nice day. But it got rebranded in our society because of the technology changes, and we are selfish about our time because, my friends, all of us are now living in a world where we are on 24/7, 365. Listen, I love talking to the restaurant industry because as a retailer who worked from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for 8 straight years of his life, I always was like, well, at least restaurant people, they work more. This is a workaholic industry. There's a lot of hours, it's really hard. But even as hard as we all worked, and not everybody here is 20, there's people that have been in the game, right? We know that pre-internet, this always connected world, at least somehow, maybe it was the morning, at least somehow you were able to disconnect. Even though I worked 12, 14 hours a day, it's not as much as I work now because basically it's 24/7. I'm on the hook. It's always on. And so what has happened is we've been pressured into an always on environment. No more 9 to 6, no more 9 to 7. What's happened is we are overvaluing time at a rapid pace that is mapping to what's happening in technology. And so this is one pillar that I'm very passionate about, where if I can respect your time, a lot of, the thing that I would say that we're most proud of at Resi is, and honestly, I've got to give Ben the credit on this. To me, I was fascinated by the inefficiencies of table management and many other variables. Ben was emphatic in the first meeting of, we have to reverse engineer the restaurant. We have to build the tool that they want. Period, end of story. What are their friction points from management to CRM and knowing who's coming in to everything? Period, end of story. And I think our momentum and hearing the good vibes from the prior panel, our momentum is in, that's it. That's what we do. You may think it's charging for tables. You may think it's mobile, you may think it's just one tool. It's a very simple thesis. Truly understand at scale what the friction points are in an industry that hasn't had as much innovation changes as others, predicated on always the thing that I'm most passionate about, which is history and romance and just the status quo, and try to see if you can reverse engineer the things that will work. And I think no matter what, and that's what OpenTable did, and that's what Uber does, and that's what Airbnb does, and that's what it is. We're living in a world now where really technology is at true scale. How many people have been without their phone for 24 hours recently? Anybody? Weird, right? Maybe you did it on purpose because you're cool and smarter than me, but my son dropped my phone the other day and I had to fix my screen. I didn't have my phone for 18 hours. I freaked the fuck out. How many people in this room, by show of hands, are always, on a normal day when you're not checking out, always within arm's reach of their phone, even when they're sleeping? Raise your hands. Interesting. How many people were disconnected for 24 hours? 3 hippies. How many within 24? All of you. These are things that we have to quantify and understand. We are now, listen, this is where I get really weird. What's next? Let me give you one preview that I'm equally not happy about. This is the beginning of the device that turns us into robots. By show of hands, with no bullshit for show, but for real, how many people in this room are willing to put this device in their body or a technology device in their body? Raise your hands. Cool, 6. And in 36 months, it'll be 42 and on and on and on. We are really, and I mean this, we are not quantifying the fact that this thing didn't exist a decade ago, that most of the social media that they talked about did not exist a decade ago, like that nobody in here texts unless you went to school in the UK for a semester a decade ago. Like, we are grossly, as humans, because this is what we do, we struggle with, our brains are not wired for understanding the exponential growth of these things, and that's where the rub is, and that's where an opportunity lies. And I think the thing that really matters here is, I think technology gets a bad rap as a friction point to the thing that I care about the most. I most care about human interaction. That's how I built my whole career. I worked on nothing makes me happy. To this day, the biggest high is still somebody to walk into the wine shop and say that they need some wine with, some fish, and I can move them on to Beaujolais when they think it's just Beaujolais Nouveau bullshit, and I can teach them about Cru. I love that. What I hope everybody in this room understands is that technology is the gateway drug to scalable human interaction. I want to say it again because this is where romance and drawing lines in the sand and thinking something is something versus really taking a step back and looking at this, technology has scaled my ability infinitely to have way more human interactions than I ever would have or could have before. It is a gateway drug to those moments. And the people that are most passionate and religious in this room to give amazing service to Greg one-on-one have the ability to use technology smartly to make it even better. Have a better lifetime value, have more context on who he is of this moment, right this day, not just how much he spends on average on wine, further, deeper, nephew's birthday, tragic event in his life, great a day, I mean, on and on and on and on. And when you really start understanding the power of where all this is going, what you do with that data becomes the variable. What you do with it. Big data and that talk in tech world, it's how you analyze it. It's what you do when you know it's a good day or a bad day. But to dismiss it as not part of the hospitality culture or the human culture is a mistake. You guys walk into, actually this is funny, I use this, but I forgot where I was for a second. In a restaurant, usually I say you walk into a restaurant, for you guys, a lot of you, in a restaurant, we often see two people sitting at a table, both on their phone the whole time, right? And you know what we do, because we're really good at it? We fucking judge, right? We look and we're like, isn't that sad? Right? If you're, especially if you want to look good with your spouse, be like, honey, look, oh my God, that's terrible. You know what I see when I see that? I see a good thing. I'm not kidding. And yes, I'm an optimistic kind of character, so take it for what it is. But I know that same couple 10 years ago, that same couple that had that relationship, they just sat across from each other and didn't say a fucking word. They don't want to be there. Now at least they have technology that lets them be where they want. And I feel happy for them on an individual basis while their relationship is not that strong. And the reason I wanted to tell that story is because it's a good story to actually have this conversation of what's really going on. You know, people want to talk about all the, you know, I have a 6 and a 3-year-old. I'm starting to get really into that parent culture, you know. People love to talk about the bad things that technology has done. What nobody wants to talk about is the good things. It's just a funny kind of point of view. Nobody talks about that it's virtually now impossible to kidnap someone. Kidnapping in our society has been crushed. You know why? We're all media companies. It's really hard to snag a kid at the mall without somebody taking a photo or getting your license plate. Nobody talks about that data, right? So everybody wants to talk about all the self-esteem and sad that you have all these teenage girls have to live in a culture of selfies and this, that. What's not talked about is that the average teenage girl 14 years ago mentioned that she had 1.3 best friends and now 4.6 because people are able to connect with people that don't happen to just be in their high school. Nobody talks about that. And so for me, I'm massively optimistic on what technology does to the people that most care about bringing great service and hospitality to their consumers. And there's several people in this industry, in this room, that I think are making decisions on what's black and white and convenient to judge all these technology shifts versus actually leveling up the conversation and understanding what's really happening to our human behavior. Because our actions, my friends, are way louder than our words. All my fellow parents now talk about how sad and scared they are about the iPads and what's it doing to their kids, but the second their kid starts snickering at the table, they fling that iPad in their mouth in a second, right? And so these are the things that I'm most paying attention to. And I think that they're very fascinating. And I think saving people time, understanding who we all are the second we walk into an establishment, and then at scale, catering and tailoring experiences for them is super fascinating. I'd really be pumped if I could save the time from ordering an orange wine from one of your establishments because the data's out there, it just hasn't been collected by you properly, right? I'd really like to also, I remember one of the fun things we had with Rezi that I thought was really cool. Again, I just want to give him daps because I like taking daps when they're mine, but they're his. You know, the notion of somebody telling you that they're running late in traffic in an efficient way, right? Managing VIPs in an efficient way that you're not getting text and emailed and called every day and random. And there's just so much to be done in operating these places, just food management, like really, really powerful stuff. And most of all, in the context of hospitality, there is, and I think nobody here that skews more technology than hospitality would ever say that we're doing as much as we can for the patrons that are coming to our organizations. And what's sad to me is that The reason that is in the spot that it is in this industry is because of the historic, romantic point of view of what hospitality is. And I'm hoping that we and all the other great players, and plenty of people that have been here today, start chipping away, and looking at that. And so, I'm reminded, and I want to go into some Q&A, I'm reminded about that day 18 years ago. There was the level of confidence I had as a 22-year-old kid compared to these icons in my industry telling me there's no way humans are gonna do that. And the level of confidence and bravado I sat in that room is only replicated by the years of experience and success I've had and the passion I have for this sector. I mean, if you are in this room today, let's break it down. Like TechTable, like if you're in this room today, you are clearly the human beings that are gonna make the decisions and the actions that are gonna take this industry in the proper direction. So I'm pumped to be here. It's why I desperately wanted to be a part of this, because I think this is the group that's gonna do it, and I'm massively confident that some of the cliche black and white entry-level debates of what technology is doing with hospitality will go away over the next half decade, and the people in this room will become the pioneers and the executors to do better for our end users, right? I mean, what you want because of the way you grew up and how you see the world has zero to do with who you're servicing on an every single day basis. And there's a lot of people in here who need a tweak in their ego about this issue. Thank you. So, VaynerMedia is a 600-person, social media digital agency. So if I know you had an incredible panel there. If you want to build on any momentum there, I feel really comfortable jamming there. I'd really love to answer some questions in any direction. Does anybody have any? Awesome. He's gonna. Yep.
Given that you hilariously missed out on Uber, it must be so hard for you to decide every day what you spend your time and money working on and investing in.
Yes.
How has that changed the way you?
The Uber situation?
Just how has missed opportunities, FOMO?
Really good, actually. I'm a funny dude that way. Like, look, the first three things I invested in 2006 were Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. So like, nobody's crying for me, right? And that level, like, that's what I love about the game. That's what I love about open markets. You're not right, your customer's right. And you can be wrong for only so long, period. I'm not so great because those were good bets. I get to equally look at the humility of missing out on what will be the generational win with the person that was my closest friend. It's crazy that I missed that, but I love that because it still drives me to want to do more. I'm not scared by that loss. I secretly want to lose again. This is why I'm a very happy New York Jets fan. I love losing.
How do you look at investments? Is there some kind of framework or criteria? It must be so hard.
It is hard, and because I was so successful, and there was this whole new super angels thing that happened that I was caught up in, and I was seeing everything. For me, I spend more time betting on just two things. Do I philosophically believe that this is going to be a big deal, right? Because that's what I'm good at, consumer behavior. So for example, I have 2 employees in South Korea right now looking at esports. I think esports is gonna be humongous. I think more people will watch the video game championship of our society in the US 15 years from today than the World Series, right? So once I believe esports is gonna be a big deal, I try to become as educated as possible. I believe that voice is the next arbitrage of time, right? That we'll be talking to our clothes, call Phil, Nat, like that kind of stuff. So I'm becoming educated in those places. Once I pick 4 to 5 things that I think are the future, 2, 3, 4, 5 years away, 3D printing, right? 360 virtual reality video. When I decide those pillars, like I have right now, then I start meeting the people in it, and then I make a singular decision on the jockey, not the horse. So I pick my horses first, and then I start trying to reverse engineer who's that person. Is she or he a wartime general or a peacetime general? What that means to me as an investor is right now everybody's a peacetime general, meaning shit's good. There's tons of money, Kids are raising tons of money on random ideas with no business model, straight out of school. There's tons of dentists and lawyers and rich people that want to find their Mark Zuckerberg, and they're writing $25,000, $50,000 checks. And when some economic crisis happens within the next tomorrow and 4 years, 85% of the funded businesses that I look at and that I know and that we all know will go directly out of business because they're completely built for the next round. They don't actually make money. So what I'm trying to find is those 15% when shit hits the fan, they know how to stay alive, right? They know how to drive a business. So those are kind of things I look for.
Hello.
Hello.
So, I mean, you are about connection, people. You're in the people connection business. So can you please speak to this industry, how there's a really missed opportunity to build the experience before they even get to the restaurant using social media?
Yeah,
Building that relationship.
or when you don't know they're coming, that's hard. What I'm way more fascinated by is once they've come in to the restaurant, for then you to have a full-time relationship with them the second they leave forever, if you want to. So my big thesis on this is that everybody in this room as a human being, and whether you're a tech provider or a restaurateur or what you may be, no matter what you do in this room, Four Seasons, the whole nine, everybody in this room is in the media business first, comma, then you do what you do for a living. And I think when people make that shift to understand what the web, the internet has done, is it's created a narrative where the cost of entry to be in the media business has changed so much and allowed all of us to play and put out content. What I did in 2006, instead of buying ads in Wine Spectator, I decided to become like it for a different area. I think that's the place. I think connecting the moment I came in and had a great, meal for lunch at this place, and now I'm in the ecosystem, whether it's through that internal app, by following them within social, creating media companies. But I think I think Food and Wine and Bon Appetit and Wine Spectator's biggest competitors are their advertisers, because their advertisers are going to start realizing the cost of entry to become them has collapsed. And so, I mean, the amount of articles that so many people in this room are willing to consume from the chef or the sous chef or the front of house person within these organizations is stunningly high and wildly under-executed in the marketplace. And so I just think there's a lot of opportunities to have that relationship. And then from the angle that I think you're going at, the ability to one-on-one CRM everybody. For me to say hello to Rita, get her into my ecosystem, and then whether I'm following her, incentivizing her to know what she's doing on social, and watching her, and then engaging with the things that matter to her outside of the environment of her loving salmon, right? Her real life, the other things that matter. No question can a local restaurant on the Upper East Side where I live get disproportionately more business from me if they actually talk to me in the social web around the Jets, not that they have a special, watermelon fucking salad. Right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to deepen the relationship with people, not just predicated on the transactional thing that we do with them or the genre that we established our relationship on, but make it more about the things they care about 360, and then we're just part of that ecosystem. Because you would all be fascinated if you looked backwards now on how you've engaged with strangers, with brands, with non-human profiles. That bridge has been crossed, and there's a real opportunity for the businesses in this room to play in that space. Yes, my man. Yo, I'm sorry. I heard. Hey.
I saw you speak
Yeah.
at Big Omaha a couple years ago.
Oh, cool.
You gave an example of a customer who was a good customer. You want to reward them.
Jay Cutler jersey?
Exactly. Will you tell that story?
Sure. So Wine Library, so a couple years ago I wrote a book called The Thank You Economy. What I really think completely is that customer service is looked upon by most places as defense, and I think that it needs to be done as offense. Thinking surprise and delight at scale, just true offense. Some of the stuff I've been alluding to for the last 10 minutes speaks to that. If I know that you love balloons, maybe I can have some for you when you come. Like, it's just an incredible thing that's going on, which is you would not believe the amount of information you're putting on about yourself on a daily basis, and nobody cares about privacy, and I can get into that later. So I'm writing this book called The Thank You Economy, and I want a huge case study to talk about investing in a customer more than they're worth to you at the moment when you invest in them. So I tell my wine library team, get me an order where you get in an order that's very low, under $100, where we made less than $20. I want wine library's profit to be like $7. But I want you to find that person on Twitter, and I want you to talk about something they're passionate about. So it took some time. Twitter was still young, so we had to find somebody who put in a low order, then match their name, and so thank God there's some people like with names like Vaynerchuk where you can actually find them. We weren't picking Joe Smith because we wouldn't know if it's that exact person, and we finally find somebody. And I get a phone call and they tell me what's going on with that person, and it's completely, his entire Twitter stream is, I love Jay Cutler is the best, this, that, and the other thing. He's talking about Jay Cutler's game against the Packers, the whole nine. Jay Cutler is a quarterback for the Chicago Bears. So I find out he ordered some cockamanian bullcrap Pinot Grigio we made $7 on, and I said, great. I go to eBay and buy him a $350 signed Jay Cutler jersey, mail it to him, and say thank you for the business. So now I'm pumped, right? Like you bought like an $80 case of Pinot Grigio and you're gonna get a Jay Cutler jersey signed in mail when clearly all your social shows that you love Jay Cutler. So I'm like, I'm pumped now. Like I don't call like 4 days later, my department like, did he respond yet? Like didn't we overnight it? Like you know, so 3 months go by. And my book's about to come out and I don't have this case study. We tried some other stuff, nothing was as good as this. This was the one, not a response. I get a random phone call from Brandon at Wine Library. He goes, got something. I'm like, not Jay Cutler, that's so awesome. He goes, no. I go, son of a bitch, that guy. I go, okay, what do you got? He goes, let me just tell you about this order. I'm like, cool. So he rattles off an order. It's a $6,400 Burgundy order. And in the notes it says, holy crap, I can't believe that you have so much Dujac. It's amazing and great prices. And then he gets very nerdy about the Burgundy. And he goes, P.S. Couple of months ago, you sent my buddy a Jay Cutler signed jersey. That's how I found out about your site. PSS, I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. So, I think the reason so many of us in this room, and I don't find this in other industries, which is why I feel such a kinship to this room, so many of us love hospitality, because if we love hospitality as a business person, and that's me, you know that the lifetime value is so valuable. You know 43 visits can get real profitable instead of 1 visit. That's why I love it, right? The lifetime value. That story speaks to lifetime value. If you overinvest in your customer up front, are you weirdly guilting them into a relationship? I mean this. It's an interesting way to think about it. But in a world where everybody else is cookie cuttering the same old stuff, what can you do that's slightly a little bit different? And it starts with strategic thinking around selling them back time and knowing a little bit more about them and arming them with what they want, not what you think you want. And then it goes to the part that most matters. Eventually everybody in this room, just like everybody was gonna eventually buy wine on the internet, eventually everybody in this room will succumb to needing to integrate more aggressive technologies in their companies, or they just won't be around because the customer will demand it, not because I said so. The more interesting part is not that part. That's gonna play itself out. The interesting part is gonna be, what are you gonna then do with it? And I think that's the fascinating part to watch, and I'm excited to watch a lot of you do it because I'm a fan from afar of a lot of you, so thanks for having me. Thank you.